And again, drawing upon my career as an educator, it was just a perfect combination. So one thing led to another, and now I'm incredibly passionate about it.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Joe Perez. With advanced degrees in computers and secondary education, along with several IT certifications, Dr. Perez brings more than his 35 years of experience to the podcast as an IT/higher ed professional. Having served as a business intelligence specialist at NC State University and currently serving as a senior systems analyst/tech lead at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, the DHHS, Doc Joe stays active in the IT community with more than 11,000 LinkedIn followers. In addition to his full-time leadership role at DHHS, Joe was named the Chief Technology Officer at Salone Tech Corporation in October 2020. He is a highly recommended international keynote speaker, data analytics and visualization expert, and a specialist in efficiency/process improvement. He is indeed a much sought-after resource. When taking a break from work, Joe sings, he plays piano, he composes songs, and does guest appearances on nationally recognized podcasts. I would hope that Ken's Nearest Neighbors is nationally recognized. He's also performed PSAs and voiceovers for schools and other organizations. In addition to all of that, he serves as a speaker, an interpreter, and a music director to his church's Hispanic ministry and enjoys publishing a monthly military newsletter. Doc Joe is a firm believer that if he is not innovating, he is stagnating. In our episode, we talk about how to get over the fear of public speaking and how important the story is for conveying data science insights. I hope you enjoy. Dr. Joe, thank you so much for coming in to the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast today. I love your story. A lot of the people tuning in are probably familiar with you because of all the speaking and keynote talks that you've been doing. And I'm excited for you to be able to share this journey that you've been on, the things that you've learned, and maybe some insights about career, data, and speaking with everyone here.
Absolutely. It is my honor and privilege to do so. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Excellent. Well, this has been a long time coming. I know you have a busy schedule. I have a busy schedule. So I'm really, really glad that we could make this happen.
Thank you, Ken. So am I.
Of course. So the first question that I really like to dive into, rather than asking for you to tell me your biography, I like to get an idea where you first got introduced with data. What was that first interaction like? Were you someone that had this pivotal moment where I want to do data after having this one experience? Or was it this longer journey where you really found yourself kind of towards the end?
Right. Well, that's something that I, how do I put it? I've always been interested in communication. Okay. I started off my professional career as an educator. I've had a passion for that, communicating with others, sharing knowledge. And part of that entails having an understanding of what the educational process is like, and that entails not only knowing your material, but also knowing your audience, right? Knowing the subject that you're teaching, and more importantly, the people that you're teaching, that you're speaking to. And part of that involves making connections with the people that you're talking to, having a sense of who your audience is. And I know I'm talking about it as from my, from my perspective nowadays as a speaker, but it was the same viewpoint when I was an educator. Okay. And a big part of doing that, making those connections with your audience, is doing so in a visually compelling manner. And that translates very nicely into technology and data. Okay, it actually started off as a side gig. My last 6 years of my education career, my teaching career, it was actually in the form of my taking on increasingly responsible jobs in the IT world during the summer months. And this would supplement my income as a teacher during the school year. Teachers don't get paid all that much money, and so I wasn't in it for the money anyway. But
you got to have that out now.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, but you got to have money to pay the bills, So And anyway, I was getting pretty good at it. And again, initially just to supplement my income, and I had an interest in it. As a matter of fact, my minor for my master's degree was in computers. So, each summer working at it, I kept getting better and better at what I was doing. It spilled into my teaching career. In my last year as a teacher, I was actually running the computer lab at the school where I taught. So, um, anyway, then a computer analyst position became open at a local university, and I'll say the name of the university: NC State. Go Pack! I love that place. I worked there for 25 years, so the longest place I ever worked at was at NC State. But anyway, I mean, when that job presented itself, well, it was the best possible marriage between my passion for education and what was fast becoming my passion for data and IT. So the summer job turned into a full-time second career, not secondary, but my, second career. So as I rose up through the ranks at the university, from let's see, from analyst programmer to managing computer training to business intelligence specialist, I had wonderful opportunities to leverage both my educational skills, my communication skills, instructional design skills, getting to put together all the training programs for my department and speaking at university events and conferences, workshops, and that sort of thing. Um, and this really ignited a passion within me for the reporting of data, since it touches all those hot buttons, in people getting to use the data that they have to drive their decisions. How do we report on it in a way that does lend itself to these people being able to make those decisions? And again, drawing upon my career as an educator, it was just a perfect combination. So one thing led to another, and now I'm incredibly passionate about it.
Well, I love that. I think that your data allows you or allowed you to do the things that you cared about better. And I think
Yes,
that it's fine to love data in and of itself and the methodologies and the machine learning frameworks or whatever it is. But if you can use data to empower your existing belief structure or help you to convey your message that you want to more clearly, it's an incredibly powerful mechanism to do that. And I'm interested, what were you teaching back then when you were
sure. Well, I taught, let's see, Spanish, economics, Bible, and computers.
wow, diverse set of skills. That's incredible. And
Yep,
I
yep, yep,
think
yep.
I really want to stress that in education, language is data, right? Well, anything related
Absolutely.
to computers is data. Economics leverages data, and even like teaching a Bible class, the Bible is one of the oldest forms of data. It's this,
That's
it's how
exactly right.
it's how we convey messages, beliefs, any of these types of things. And I think that really gets overlooked a lot, is that um, stories or messages or biographies, any of these types of things, historically was the most effective way to convey information. It used to be
Absolutely.
through word of mouth, right? And you'd have to you have to attach like a narrative to something because it makes it easier to remember, right?
Indeed.
And then we start writing it down, and I think that process is really important to think about as well. Is that every everything that we learn requires some data in some form, and I just wish more people thought of it that way.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like when they, using the information that they have to drive the decisions they make. People are saying, well, I'm just going to go with my gut in whatever business decision without realizing, well, what is it that informs your gut? It's going to be data of one form or another, whether you're looking at a hard, fast report that has that data in there for you, or whether you are listening to the opinions that have been given to you about people who are reporting to you as to how your business is going, some concrete, finite method of measuring your success, your KPIs, and so forth. It may be told to you in a story format. It may not necessarily be in a data visualization, but yeah, those are data points that go into your grid, into your decision making process. And so you're going to make that decision based on the input that you've received, whether that input be in a story form or that input be in a report form. And I guess when you put the two together, well, what do you get? Data storytelling, you know?
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think there's also one added element where it's not just the data that's coming in, it's also how you're acting on that data from your past experiences. You know, the model of you has been trained in the past. And it doesn't mean that the data is wrong. It might be that your model is not representative to the specific solution, or it could be that the data is bad and you're making that quote unquote gut decision based on a faulty foundation. And it's also interesting to think of our decision making as humans in terms of how some of these models work. I mean, obviously the models are based on how we think as humans, but if you go the other direction and deconstruct it, it's really cool to be able to say, hey, like every action that I take is a function of like who I am, but also the data that I'm observing and the things that are coming in and the social forces working on me. I mean, and that model of human behavior isn't that complicated. It's pretty simple, actually.
No, when you break it down into its constituent parts, when you know, distill it to its fundamental, you know, it's like, well, just like what you were saying about stories. That is so fundamental. I mean, I love a good story just like the next guy, you know? I mean,
Probably more
as you
than
were
the
saying,
next guy.
yeah, well, probably so. I mean, you know, that goes back to my days as an educator. You know, most of us, like you said, humans learn best by hearing things in a narrative form, in a story form. And you could always adapt a good story to get to however you want to make your point. You know, I mean, in my case, both as an educator, as an IT professional, as a keynote speaker, you know, stories are extremely important. I mean, not only they're going to get my attention, you know, because once they got my attention, they will have ignited my passion that I then communicate to others, and I want to ignite their passion. I want to captivate their thinking. You know, get into the thinking process of my audience. It doesn't matter if it's in a classroom, at a data center, or on a stage. You know, I I read in a recent Harvard Business Review study that good stories create a sense of connection. They build familiarity and trust. They let the listener be more open to the learning process, to jump into it at whatever point that they're in, you know, easy to remember, suited for including lessons learned, whether it's a good congratulatory thing or it's a bad cautionary tale sort of thing. And what are you doing? You're inputting more data into that decision making process. It's just in a narrative form rather than in some, you know, linear or tabular form. Whatever the case, if it's told the right way, a story can be just as visually compelling as a picture. But when you put it together with a picture, and when those words and those stories and those pictures and that narrative and that plot, you know, and that you know, you got protagonist and antagonist, you've got you know, the intro, you've got the body, you've got the conclusion, you've got whatever the twist, you know, the plot twist. The same thing applies with data. Yeah, when you can weave those elements of a story into data storytelling, then you know you're golden, because you will have appealed both to the imagination and to the visual and to the intellectual and to whatever else you're trying to get at. The more connections you make with your audience, the deeper and the broader that learning experience is going to be, and the more effective and efficient you're going to be in getting whatever message that you have across to the person on the other side. And isn't that the measure of success, right? Whether you're a teacher, I mean, you're selling a product, you've got something that somebody else needs, and they've got to be convinced that the thing that you've got is more important than the money in their hand, right? I've got the product in my hand, you've got the money in your hand. We make an exchange, commerce takes place, business happens, transaction is effected, and I'm better off because I've got your money. You're better off because you have whatever it was that I was selling. Well, it's the same way with information, with data, with speaking, with topics, right? What do I have? I may not have a mouse that I'm trying to sell you. I have data that I want to present to you. I have some story, if you will, that I want to tell. And what are you giving up? You may not be paying me
Time.
for it. You're
Yeah.
giving up your time. Yeah, exactly. Whether you're paying for it or not, you are paying because you're giving up your time to listen to me rattle stuff off to you. So, what little time we've got together, I got to be able to take advantage of it and communicate it in such a way that captivates your attention, draws in your psyche, presents whatever I want to present, and either change your mind about something or cause you to already confirm what you already knew was true by the additional information that I've provided, granted or provided that I have given it to you in a way that is coherent and compelling. It's got to be both. If it's compelling but not coherent, you won't follow it. If it's coherent but not compelling, you're going to lose interest. So you got to do both.
Yeah, and I really want to highlight the idea of using other people's time and creating value for them in that time of period, right? So, I mean, I'm sure we both get quite a few messages every day, every week, every month.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't have, if I spent all day responding to emails and messages and comments, I'd work 8-hour days if that's all I did, right? And
Right.
the ones that you
Not counting
respond
your
to,
other work. Yeah.
exactly. And the ones that you respond to, these messages are the ones that have a compelling reason for you to respond to, that you didn't feel like, wow, this would be a waste of my time to respond to or a waste of my time to read, because
Exactly.
maybe it's that I've already answered this question somewhere else, and it's my time they're wasting rather than 10 more minutes of their own time, right? Or it's
Yep.
that, hey, this person, they just said hi. That's not a compelling reason for me to respond to that. I get a lot of those every day, and I would rather have someone just send the question over, and if it's a 2-sentence answer, it's easier for me to respond to. These are things that are, most people don't conventionally think of them as storytelling, but there is a narrative around those. There is also that
Yes.
time sensitivity, and there's that value exchange that are a part of every human interaction. And I think that every time we're speaking or we're reaching out or we're communicating with someone else, it's useful to think of that framework as that, what am I giving them? What are they giving up? Or what are they giving me? And what am I giving up? I mean, I wouldn't say make every human interaction transactional, but even if you're hanging out with a friend or something, it's that, at the most basic level, you're giving up your time and you're spending time with them and you're enjoying it. You enjoy their presence and their company, but
Right.
you are giving something up and you're getting something, hopefully, in every single interaction. And usually, as you said, or in good cases, it's win-win.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask you, you touched on it a little bit before, and I've read a lot about this, so I'm fascinated to get another viewpoint, is what makes
Sure.
a compelling story in general?
What makes a compelling story? Um, I'd say conflict followed by resolution, um, issue followed by explanation, um, defeat followed by victory, and failure followed by success.
That was so well put, and very clear. So I read this book a while ago called The Science of Storytelling. So I'm always trying to improve
Ooh,
the quality of my videos, right? Is that
right.
if I have 10 minutes, hopefully, of someone's time, how do I get them to stay through the whole video? How do I get them interested the whole time? How do I get them to, um, you know, hopefully get as much value as they can out of what I'm
Mhm.
showing them by essentially watching the whole video? And
Right.
I think there are a couple things you touched on. So the first is stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And that's how we convey information. If I just said, XYZ happened, that's giving you the end. But if I also said that, oh my goodness, did you see the news? It started with this, and then this crazy thing happened, and this is how it ended up. Like, no one just wants to hear the middle of the story, right? If you
Right.
hear the beginning and the middle, you want to hear how it resolved. I mean, if I said, "Oh my gosh, did you hear XYZ got in a car accident?" Your first question would likely be, "Oh my goodness, are they okay?" Right? And so
Mhm.
I love that element. And then the conflict and resolution is something that I struggle to find, and it's I think that's a real art of figuring out how to integrate that into an educational experience. And
Mhm.
so sometimes, for example, um, it's easier than others, especially with projects or problems that you face, where it's like, hey, this is this clear problem that I wanted to solve. But it's interesting, the most compelling types of conflict and resolution for a narrative are ones that people don't necessarily have control over. So if I said that,
Right.
I drove into uh, if I drove off the highway, you'd probably feel a lot not as bad for me as if I got T-boned, right? As and
Yeah, because then only
it's
you
just
get hurt when you drive off the highway. Somebody else gets hurt if they T-bone you, and you know they their airbags don't deploy or something stupid like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly, and one is 100% my fault if I drove off the highway. I did something stupid. I was looking at my phone and I drove off the highway. That would be an even worse one. Luckily, neither of those things have happened any time recently. So,
Well, that's good.
knock on
Knock
wood.
on wood.
Um, but I'm interested in how you frame conflict in in the domain of data and technology. What are some of the techniques that you can do that at?
Sure. That's a good question, Ken. Man, that is good. So, okay, when you have in mind that you are going to tell a story with data, when you also have in mind that the person who's your audience or the people who are your audience, okay, are going to have some sort of decision to make as a result of whatever it is that you've presented, that in and of itself is a natural conflict because in one of my presentations I talk about the three principles of actionable data. Okay. Data is only actionable when it helps people to make a decision, answer a question, or solve a problem. All right. Now, in setting up that conflict, when you already have the actionability of data in mind, well, that there's already a conflict. The conflict is I have a decision to make and I have not made it yet. Add to that conflict by saying, how long do you have to make that decision? Okay. Um, or I have a question I need to answer. The conflict is the question is not answered and I have a need to know. Anytime that there is a need that has not yet been fulfilled, that's a conflict. Again, it can be, you don't see it as a conflict. You say, oh, yeah, I'm okay. I don't really, well, whatever. But, you frame it that way. Solving a problem, there is an issue that needs to be resolved, and you need to gather the information, the data that's necessary in order to resolve that issue, that problem, that addressing that concern that's been brought up. That is a conflict too. So then, in framing it with those end goals in mind and knowing that you are going to help someone to give them the insight that they need so that they can either make a decision, answer a question, or solve a problem, well, you've already set up the conflict resolution. The conflict being there is that question to answer, there is that need to be met, there is that problem to be resolved, that issue to be addressed. And so, therefore, the conflict is the difference between where you are now and where you want to be and where you've got to be is when you present the data, when you present the solution, when you present the trend analysis, whatever the case, then you have presented it both in an instructional way, in a visually compelling way, and with the end goal in mind of helping that person get to that point where that decision can be made, the question can be answered, the problem can be resolved, the issue and concern or concerns plural can be addressed. Every one of those is a form of conflict, which you then resolve by providing the answer to the question, the solution to the problem, and the fulfillment of the need.
I really like that.
That's
And
what I think.
I hadn't quite thought of it like that before. And I think something really neat about that is that data and analysis of data is almost always the resolution to the conflict. And
Yeah, that's the whole point. Exactly.
exactly. And
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
yeah, and the void
Absolutely,
of that
Ken.
is that we don't have the data or whatever it is, especially in the
Right.
talks that we're doing, is that, oh, like the problem is we don't have this data and we could be doing so much with it, whatever that might be. Another really interesting element that I've read about in good stories is character development and
Mm,
seeing growth over time, and having a flawed character, and essentially everyone wants, you want the character to succeed, but they keep getting in their own way. And I think
right.
we see that narrative as either the data being anthropomorphized a little bit, or a company falling into this rut with regards to data, is that um, you know the company wants to use data, they want to do these things, but they can't, they keep getting in their own way. And at some point they do something that fixes it. But I'm interested also not just in understanding conflict, but also understanding, like, how do we humanize data? How do we bring life to it in these stories? And how do we talk about it in a way that we can see that growth either within an organization or within the data itself?
Sure. Well, um, I like one of my taglines that I like putting on my when I flash my ugly mug in front of a some kind of banner or something is I bring excuse me bringing data to life and life to data. That's one of the things I like to do. Um, and yeah, in humanizing or anthropomorphizing, and I can't believe I said that without stumbling over it. I love that word.
Nailed it.
Anthropomorph. Yeah, all right. Yes. So, humanizing something, attributing human characteristics. Okay. Well, data, if you are plotting data over time, it has a life cycle. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're talking about a certain time period during which your observations, the actual values in those observations at those different points in time will increase and decrease. Is there some kind of cycle to the data? Is that cycle event driven? Is it time driven? Is it driven by other pieces of data that are going in? Is it affected adversely? Is it affected conversely? Is it affected, whatever? And so each of those elements, you can say if it's in a cycle, well, then we're talking about a heartbeat. So you've got peaks and valleys, just like you look at an EKG, there's peaks and valleys in it. And as long as that keeps on going in linear fashion, then you shall continue to live. It is when there are no peaks and valleys where this thing in here isn't going lub dub, then, that's when you've got some serious issues, right? How long can you continue without the lub dub? All right. So then you look at the data and you look at the fluctuations, the peaks and valleys, the ups and downs. That's the heartbeat. That shows, what's cyclical. All right. As it is, if you have an upward trend that shows improvement, I don't know, express it in icons that show increased levels of a smiley face, from a frowny face to a neutral face to a smiley face. That's one anthropomorphization of of the data. If you're just talking about something, excuse me, increasing over time, then it can be expressed as the differing stages of life. When you're a kid, the company first starts, the icon can look like a little baby. He's not even crawling. Then he's standing. Then he starts getting taller as the bar graph, gets bigger. Then the little kid's head gets bigger as he goes into adolescence and adulthood. There's a merger between two companies that can be anthropomorphized as a marriage, that you've got the two partners coming in and they're mutually beneficial to each other. Or if it's not so beneficial and they have to split, then that again anthropomorphized as a divorce. The different divisions are started within the company. Different subsidiaries are formed within the company, and you present data on each of those subsidiaries that can be anthropomorphized into the children of the couple that got married. And you see them thriving. You have a story about them. The boss has a pet project that she nurtured into beginning. Some, I don't know, data center initiative in 2 or 3 cities that she wanted to revitalize the economy. And because of those data centers that came into being from that company, the economy was revived in those cities, and she's really proud of that. So you present that in a positive light. You mentioned that, and it is a getting back to the story, getting back to the humanization. As a parent, would be happy to see her children thrive. So also would a CEO be happy to see her subsidiaries of her main company thriving as well? Uh, excuse me, because it is an achievement. Um, you see your teammates achieve. Well, present the data on your sales force, your customer service reps, the rate at which they were able to close calls, the amount of time that they kept a customer on hold over the last year decreased from 45 seconds to 15 seconds. That increased customer engagement. That caused them to gain confidence and be able to take a higher volume of calls. That caused them to be able to mentor other brand new employees coming on the force. That enabled the salespeople to be able to make more sales calls, to bring in more business. Again, anthropomorphizing that, your coworkers, your siblings, your brothers and sisters in the family. Okay, so each one of these things that you have data points that show, you're not, yeah, you have the story that says, hey, our company is doing great. But when you bring the richness of all these different variegated, multifaceted dimensions to what you're talking about, the subsidiaries and the companies and the different your different business lines and the different levels of your employees and how each one is contributing to the success of the whole. This gets brought into the story, and the richer you can make that story, and not making stuff up, but telling it like it is, but yet doing so in a creative way, looking for ways to express it that show these different facets. The more facets that you can see in a diamond, the more clearly the light gets reflected, the more brilliant the shadows, the more stunning the view, and the more pleasing the appearance. All right. Well, do the same thing with the data. Do the same thing with the mode of your presentation. Do the same thing with the tone, the appearance, the color scheme, the palette. And then the pitch when you finally speak to the leadership and bring this whole package together, to either encourage to continue doing a great job, or if there is some cliff up ahead and you've got the data to show, hey, we need to change something to avoid going over said cliff. In the same way, the anthropomorphization, that word I keep stumbling over, a parent is going to warn their kid to not ride their bike in that certain place. If not, you're going to get hit by a car, whatever. So we use the data to encourage, to warn, to get people to see what the bottom line is and what can be done to increase it, or lead them, put them in the position where they can do whatever they need to do, to change whatever needs to be changed, so that they can do those three things I talked about: making the decision, answering the question, and solving the problem. All because you were able to tell the story with data.
Well, I think one really high level thing I'd love to pull out of that is that you want to speak to people in terms that are meaningful to them, right?
Absolutely.
If I say, I, this example cracks me up every single time, but I remember when I
Right.
was in high school, and this is very weird and tangential, but there was this commercial that would play on the radio for Wendy's, and they had this sandwich called the double stack, and it was
I
it
love
was
the
a
double
dollar,
stack.
right?
Uh-huh.
And someone would be like, "Oh, that your haircut, that'll be 20 double stacks." It was like $20, and they were converting the dollars into sandwiches. I like love Wendy's as a kid, and to me,
Yeah.
that one really spoke to me. I was like, "Wow, $100 is 100 double stacks. Like that's a lot of sandwiches I could get." Like that
Right.
gives meaning if you're hungry to the sandwich, and I think that
Yeah.
that's really important. Is if you're talking about how, um, if you're talking about time savings, right? If you're talking about, hey, you could spend 15 more minutes with your kids this week, that means a lot more than you'll have 15 minutes back. And framing
Exactly.
things to individuals, sometimes dollars are most meaningful to people, but that's not always the case. And thinking about, hey, who is your audience and what is going to be
Yes.
most meaningful to them is
Exactly.
always
How
a
can you
really
draw them in? How can you engage them? How, what is there a call to action? Is there some sort of compelling message that you want to get across that will resonate and be, you need to get to have both resonance and relevance. It's going to resonate with their thinking and it's going to be relevant to their acting.
I love that. And so we've obviously talked about what makes compelling story. I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in hearing more about your journey through starting to speak, eventually doing keynote speaking. What did that look like for
Uh-huh.
you? This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. As datasets get larger, unraveling meaningful insights can become more time consuming and costly. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that Z workstations can come standard with Linux, and they can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of trying to completely reconfigure your new machine. There are a wide variety of hardware configurations, so you can easily find a Z solution that meets your specific needs. Now, back to our show.
I'm glad you asked me that, Ken. I guess uh, the the time that it started with me was when I was an educator. I mean, that goes back a long ways. Okay, I was asked to speak at other schools and organizations about the school where we were attending, or where I was teaching, I should say, and I talked about the best practices and the things that we did and how it can be done in others. It was a private school, so another thing was to boost enrollment and things. So I'd speak in schools and schools and churches and other organizations all over the place. That was a lot of fun. And when I got into my IT career at the university at NC State, the 25 years that I was there, that I hinted around at earlier, it was a natural fit for the deans and the people that I reported to, my bosses, my superiors, to ask me to share with others, to speak at various university workshops and conferences. That even led to my emceeing some pretty big university-wide events. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that thoroughly. Speaking, the emceeing and thing, and it kind of makes it easy when they already know that I'm a ham anyway. Okay. But more recently, so the speaking thing hasn't been. I've been doing it for 30, 40 years. The thing that was new is doing it at conferences that were outside of where I was working, and that started in 2018. Well, 2017, I was invited to attend a conference of CIOs. I wasn't a CIO, but I was invited to go, and one of the people was having issues with one of his graphs, and he said, "Can you help?" And I talked with him. Oh gosh, we talked for maybe, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes and stuff. And I gave him some ideas and he bounced some things off of me. And he looked me in the eye and says, "I really appreciate this. I will never forget your kindness." I thought, well, that was really nice of him to say. Well, then he put on his coat and stood up, and I didn't even realize he was the keynote speaker for that afternoon. The other thing I didn't realize is that he was on the committee to decide who gets to speak. And he put a bug in the ear of the people running the conference, and I spoke the next year. So, one thing led to another, and word got out, social media posts and things, and The following year, which was 2019, I spoke in 9 different conferences, some local things and some out of town things, including the Master Data Marathon or excuse me, I'm getting that confused. Sorry. The MDM Data Governance Summit in Chicago in July of 2019. That 8 or 9 other events. Word got out some more, and in 2020, which I thought the pandemic was going to cut things off, and if anything, it opened up more opportunities. I ended up speaking at 26 conferences last year. It just totally blew me
Every
away.
other
It's
week.
like, just about, yeah. I mean, I'm not a famous person at all. I am no Ken G. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, nobody
I'm no
knows.
Ken G in the way you describe
And
it.
you're
So
no Ken G either. I knew Ken G. Right. Yeah. But in this year, so far this year, I've got 28 speaking engagements. It's phenomenal. I can't believe it. It just blows me away. I'm surprised, humbled, bewildered, excited. All those emotions all at the same time. And it just I guess it's because since I am passionate about what I talk about, um, I want to ignite that same passion in my audience. And I don't know if maybe that with the relevance and resonance that I was talking about before, and the topics that I speak about are high level topics, though some are technical in nature and some are motivational in nature. But I do it at, I guess, as a higher level so that it has more appeal. And I'm not just doing a sales pitch about some product. So you put all that stuff together and add to that the bit about me being a ham, and wanting people to know and having that sense of knowing that their time is valuable, and I've got to bring my A game every time, whether it's virtual or in person. Uh, so that kind of brings me as a natural at this. I love what I do. I love what I talk about, and I love the people that I talk to, and it just fuels my fire to want to do it even more.
well, I think that that's a really powerful combination between loving what you're talking about and also loving talking to an audience and conveying that message as well. I think that's something that I wouldn't say it's a gift that really compelling speakers have, but it's something that they've been able to turn on, or something they've been able to
Sure.
leverage. I think anyone
Oh,
can
absolutely.
develop a passion for both of those
Yeah.
things. And
And see if it gets your motor. That's just it. It gets your motor. If it gets your motor going, it's going to motivate you to go ahead and bring your A game, to spend the time that it takes to develop your topic and to hone your craft and to practice and to be mindful of who you're talking to and what your audience is and what your subject, all these things. It really gets my motor going when I see the lights come on in the eyes of the people that I'm talking to. That tells me, hey, I've done the right thing, and that just drives me even more. So that's just it, is being driven to do better and to push your own self to a higher standard, so that if people come to expect that, then I've got to bring it.
well, I want to highlight what you said about seeing the lights turn on in people's eyes. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that that clearly is compelling to you. That's a motivating factor for you that makes you love standing up there and talking to people. And I think that everyone can find something like that in their own experience. I mean, for me, I'm constantly thinking about with my videos or with any of the speaking that I've done is that if there's one person that either they land a job, they work on their first project that they love, they find an interest in this field, or they find that, hey, data science isn't for me, and like it would have been not a good experience for me to go down this route. That to me is extremely rewarding, to say that
Absolutely.
you get those emails, you get those comments, whatever it is. And
Yes. And I've
um,
gotten them, and oh my goodness. Nothing means more to me as a speaker than to know I've made a positive impact on my audience. Just like when I was a teacher, an educator, nothing meant more to me to get a note from one of my kids to say, hey, I appreciate what, I learned something, or I was steered into the right path from, like you said, about, somebody knows this is not for me. Had you not warned me, I would have gone down the wrong, So yeah, I agree with you 100%, Ken.
Yeah. And I would behoove any of the listeners to think about, hey, what is that in your life if you do want to do speaking, or if if you want to do anything, is that what is that linchpin in that process for you? Again, for you,
Yeah,
it's the look in people's eyes when they get it or they get excited. For me, I'm sure this also applies for you, but it's like, hey, you know, seeing maybe not immediately, but after the fact that someone enjoyed what I was saying and they resonated with them, and hearing that. But I think that a lot of the times it can also be that to just be up there and say you did it. If you're a little introverted and you get through that first public speaking engagement or something like
yes,
that, that is such a powerful feeling. I mean, I can't really relate to that one as much because I'm extremely extroverted, but I have some friends that were terrified when they first did it, and then they got up there and they realized that it was extremely liberating. I mean, if you're
absolutely.
uh,
You have to own the stage. You have a presence. You have to own your material, know it so well, right? And be passionate about, like I said before, and you own the stage. You are comfortable in your own skin, and you use the space that you have. Of course, that's something that, in the virtual world, it's quite a bit more challenging. But yeah, when we hopefully in the near future get back to being able to have in-person events safely, that's if there's any advice, I would get is to, yeah, own that stage, use that space. Don't be glued to a podium.
I love that. And one last thing I'd like to mention in regards to doing this, again, whether you're introverted or extroverted, something I learned a while ago is that most stand-up comedians are extremely introverted. And
Mm-hmm.
standing up, talking in front of an audience, it might be terrifying, but you control that whole experience, right? There's no uncertainty. There's no, when should I enter this conversation? There's no, what do they think about that last thing that I said? You have so much time to prepare these interactions that although,
Exactly.
yes, you are speaking it, to a certain extent, it is still an introverted endeavor until you're doing Q&A, because you have such control over this whole pipeline. And although, again, you are talking to a group, until the end of Q&A, you're not interacting with the group. And I think it's really interesting to think about it and say, yes, I'm speaking, but I can speak as an introvert. Speaking is different
Mm-hmm.
than interacting. It's different than having this normal flow of conversation. And
Right.
you know, to me, that's a powerful thing to say, that you, if you're reframing these types of things, you can do them. You can do them very well, and they might even be a really powerful outlet for you to stretch who you are, stretch your capabilities, stretch what you want to do, even if they're really uncomfortable to start with.
Exactly.
Awesome. Those are all the questions I had. If there's anything, any parting words of advice, any final thoughts, any things that you'd like to share that you care about, I would love to hear anything along those
Sure.
lines.
Well, if you're interested in speaking, um, find something that you're good at, find something that you know, find something that drives you, right? I mean, if you're going to stand up in front of a bunch of people, whether it's virtually or in person, it's got to be something that drives you, because you're going to be the focus of attention. And if you're the focus of attention, you're going to have to drive the event for however long you're up on the stage, 20, 30, 45 minutes, however long you're up there. You're in the driver's seat. So you've got to be driving it. You've got to be driving that process, right? At the same time, it's got to be something that drives you, something that you're good at, something that you're passionate about. Write it down. Write down your topics. Develop your idea. Think of some snazzy, I use the word, whatever, some idea that you can communicate about in a whatever amount of time. Get some kind of outline, get some kind of learning objectives, takeaways that people will get from it. Write it down, develop it. Set you up a site, set you up if you don't have your own website, set up a profile on one of these speaker sites. I strongly recommend sessionize.com. You can put up your topics, you can put up your bio, fix you up a bio, write down some things about yourself succinctly. If you have references, if you have testimonials, the places where you've spoken, some pictures, whatever. But check out my page at sessionize.com/Joe Perez, and you'll see an example of how I did it. And you can do the same thing. That will propel you into pursuing something that, if you're interested in it, it can be very rewarding, because you're speaking to people, you're influencing people. Hey, use that influence for good. And as you go through all this, don't get discouraged if you don't get the speaking gigs. Look on the positive side. Whatever it is that you're able to accomplish, look at that as a milestone, something that you've done that's right. Don't focus on the negative. Just be cautious and aware that things are going to get better. And no matter how bad it might seem to you, there's somebody else that's worse off. So, keep a smile on your face, and maybe you can try to put a smile on somebody else's face as well.
I love that. And I'll link Dr. Joe's Sessionize page in the description to this video. One final closing note is that, Dr. Joe did not become such an eloquent and energetic public speaker overnight.
Nope.
I don't think I'm anywhere near that front, but I didn't get comfortable with public speaking until I practiced it quite a bit. And there's plenty of ways to do this. I practice doing a podcast every week. I practice in my videos. One of the main reasons I started making YouTube videos was that I wanted to improve the way that I talked. I wanted to improve my energy. I wanted to improve my diction. I wanted to improve the reverence that I speak with it on rare occasions. And you do that by watching yourself. You do that by studying. There's a process to all of these things. So if you're going up and you're like, wow, I'm not great at this, I don't think there are very many public speakers that are great at it their first time around. I know I certainly was not. But if you look now, I think I'm pretty decent. I can hold my own.
Heck yeah.
So
oh yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 to me, on a scale of 1 to 10, you, buddy, are an 11.
I appreciate
I'm serious. I mean that.
That means you must be a 25, Dr. Joe.
Oh, you are too kind. You are too kind, my friend.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I greatly enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to more conversations between us in the future.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for the honor of having me on your program, Ken.